Welcome to Golden Chat, where we provide straight talk. Each week, we deliver insights and tips on senior living to help seniors and their family experience a better daily living. And as well, we help investors to connect with senior housing. So there's something for everybody in this podcast. So I'm your co-host, Stella, with Pedro, I'm your host, Stella, with your co-host, Pedro. And we have a guest, Theresa Foster from West Central Solutions. She came on another podcast and she's joining us today to talk about what is the affordable senior housing of the future. Yes. So, Teresa, we love to have you on the podcast before, and we love your views. And this time, we want to focus on understanding from different point of view what would look like, what the affordable piece would look like, because we do need affordable senior housing.
Yes.
Uh, so, so I think affordable is going to change. I mean, right now, I would say in Florida and in other states, affordable is has a Medicaid component, but affordable is moving into where every senior can afford it or the family can help them. So I would say we're going to move into, let's say, less than $3,000 in the Florida market, all inclusive. Um, and care is going to look different. I mean, just beyond the price, the way that the buildings are set up, the things that we've done, we've sold, and I hope I'm not talking out of turn here, we've sold the glitz and glamour and assisted living. And we're moving into what we really are about is adding assistance and providing a home-like environment with the social component.
Oh, that's marvelous. I love to hear things like that. It just gets me excited.
I
So
know that.
let me just jump right on in there. But in your opinion, right? How many models of a senior living are there? So that way the consumer have an idea. In your opinion, of course.
Uh, I would say less than 10% right now.
Got you. Okay. So that would be starting with like an independent model, an assisted model, and then a sharing modality, similar to like Golden Girls, something like that, right?
Mhm.
Gotcha.
Yes.
And what do you think happens? So so now what's affordable for assisted living right now in a shared room?
In a shared room, okay, so the average across the US is about $3,600, but a shared room could be $2,800. So you
28.
have two people in
Got
there,
you.
yes. But
Got you.
that's not a very big space.
Got you, got you, and that's a large margin, really. Also, so
Mhm.
with that being said, individuals in the who aren't in that price bracket, what's happening to the individuals that don't meet
Hmm.
that don't have that
What's happening to them? They're
those
going
individuals,
that can't afford it.
correct, that
Okay,
aren't
so
meeting that baseline of that $2,600.
well, this is something that might be uncomfortable, but they're displaced. They're having to move in with people. They're living probably with a neighbor or their child, but they're not getting the care that they need. And, it is really a shame. You lived your whole life, take care of your family, work for your community, pay your taxes, and then you can't afford to live somewhere. And I'm going to say something that is going to be uncomfortable again. The, let's say you need Medicaid. The wait is forever here in the state of Florida. I mean,
Right.
it's like an imaginary resource right now. Veterans benefits, the wait for that. So if you qualify for those two areas, you're on a waiting list. So if you haven't prepared to need senior housing, or you don't have an immediate need, and somebody can navigate the way in from a skilled facility, you're you're out of luck.
Right. Because we've had callers in the past that, and family members that have called in for callers, and individuals aren't able to pay that. So what
Hmm.
ends up happening is that they reside in an unsafe environment, such as,
Hmm.
as you mentioned, whether it's a hotel or extended stay. Some are in apartments, but they're still not receiving any type of medical assistance that they need. This COVID has actually blown that up to the point where people can't even get to the store now. People can't
Hmm.
get their supplies. So it's quite interesting. It is. Stella?
Yeah, so from a resident point of view, and we had that discussion before, we're looking at in average like a 26,000 would be comfortable with for most people.
2,600.
20, yes, 26,000 would be a lot of money. 2,600. Thank you, Pedro. It would be kind of the average price for affordable. Now, how can we, as because I'm on the creating a facility side, and you on both sides as well. How, as the owners, we can create those kind of facilities that will support those kind of rates? What can we do? What that facility would look like to you if you had to create it today?
Well, definitely shared apartments. A layout that is very uses wisdom on care that is being provided. So that way, oversight is happening without making sure that everyone's right in the communal. So that when a caregiver is doing a step and they're taking care of somebody, there's a way for them to get more accomplished during those steps.
I have
Go ahead.
your opinion, of course. HIPAA has always been a big issue. What I've noticed with COVID is HIPAA kind of has been, I'm not saying it's out the window. However, HIPAA hasn't been mentioned much, especially when we're looking at the aspects of the results, how results are given for staff, so on and so forth. I mean, that level of protection, even with HIV, you had level of protection, whereas COVID, there isn't. What are your thoughts on that?
I think HIPAA's convenient. They chose to use it for everything we were possibly doing, but now what they're to me they're actually targeting people. I know in Florida when the list was released on who had COVID, which buildings had a COVID resident or a COVID staff, that some staff members when they went to drop their children off for daycare, their children were not allowed. I mean, it blows my mind that we would disregard privacy about health all because we're in a pandemic.
Hmm. Affordable housing of the future. So preparation is really the key. And what are you? Would you be able to give a little bit of what the steps would look like for individuals who are preparing? I know that there's not a lot of movement currently. However, if individuals are still seeking on thinking about moving into a independent or an assisted living model, what steps they could take?
One, I would get online and research what kind of things are being said online. Because now that we're in a technology, a lot more people are writing reviews or, making a complaint. So definitely you know, Google what's happening in senior housing. Get your COVID test. Make sure that, because that's going to be required to move in anywhere, or you're going to be quarantined in the building, which to me is not conducive to anyone moving in. I mean, you and I both know moving is already traumatic for our age group. You add
Correct.
it to an 80-year-old, then you say, hey, I want you to move, but then I want you to quarantine for 14 days and you can't come out of your room.
Right.
That makes no sense. Asking about what kind of incentives they're doing, because communities will start doing incentives. I look for a lot of owners who are in the industry to do a secured rate for the rent for a couple years,
Yes.
waive the move-in fees, ask. I mean, I gave someone the advice the other day. I said, ask for everything. Ask for the rent to be reduced, ask for no move-in fee. All they can say is no.
Correct.
Um, and ask these questions. Ask how long the administrator's been there. Ask how
Yeah.
long the longest caregiver has been there, because ultimately you are trusting yourself and your loved one, if you're an adult daughter, to go into a community and then we're saying you can't enter.
Right.
Yeah. What do you
That's
think? Sorry, go ahead.
no, I just said that's a scary thought.
That
It
is.
is. It
Thank
is.
you
It
for
is.
that. Thank you.
Yeah. And what do you think the government could do as a response to the situation? Because I know we all the senior living world is all over the place right now. What do you think the government could do that actually could help the situation regarding to the affordable aspect of senior living?
Well, I don't know how quickly they could do a Medicare benefit, but they could increase Social Security, some sort of, payback for rent. They have to do something, and not just the federal government. The states need to do something,
Hmm.
because I don't think anyone's addressed something. What happens when the senior isn't able to pay their rent, and the community's trying to evict them. Are they protected under the new guidelines of no eviction? No one's saying that they're protected.
No, they're not.
Hmm.
Pedro, what do you think the government could do?
I know people hate to hear this word, but there needs to be a tax of some kind that's across the board. But but it goes specifically towards for seniors strictly. They've given, just like Teresa said, they've done so much on their younger years, and now they shouldn't have to be worrying about whether or not they're going to be evicted, whether they have medication, whether they can see a doctor. I think there need to be provisions. I drive around all the time. I see empty buildings. I'm like, wow, wouldn't that make such a great
Hmm.
building? I think regulations need to be put into place. However, the regulations where there's a rule for a rule for a rule for a rule for the same law needs to change. Those things need to be, done with. We need to let's make things a little. I mean, the licensing agencies need to be restructured. There needs to be there needs to be a lot of things done because people are unfortunate. There's the business side to this also, and of course, you have to have a profit margin so you can have staff, so on and so forth, and pay them appropriately. However, it doesn't have to be such a stringent process. And unfortunately, the senior ends up paying the bulk of this with the most complications because the leases and the contracts are very complicated. All inclusive means one price for everything, not a la carte needs to be done away with, where you have a price just for a bath, and then a price for medication, and a price for a special activity, or a price that needs to go away. So, your thoughts on that, Teresa?
Well, I agree. I think this nickel and diming the consumer has to change, because I think COVID's taught us something very important, is that there's a lot of value in the wisdom that our elderly have. And there's a big connection to the community that they have, and we need to be responsible. And we have had huge profit margins, and now it's time to let's be considerate of the senior and making sure their needs are met. I mean, if pandemic hasn't shown us what the value of life is, then I
Right,
don't know what will. I mean, so it's beyond just will they get COVID. It's seriously like, what is their quality of life? Think about the stress of not being able to stay somewhere you live because now you need an extra assistance getting a bath, and you did not plan on that at the time of your move because you were independent.
right. It's
Yes.
interesting. We did a podcast, remember, Stella, on our onset, and we talked about pricing and the importance of looking at the amenities of a location versus the needs that you have. And
Hmm.
I find interesting that now COVID has ultimately shut down those communities that had these pools and these pool tables and all these media
Hmm.
rooms. So individuals are locked in their rooms. They're paying for services. So they're paying for amenities that they're not even able to use. So that money could be used. Are they being discounted? Are they still receiving? Has it been compensated with more service? Those are questions that families need to ask.
Hmm.
So on that note, and this week maybe our last question, Teresa, what do you think the affordable building would look like from everybody's perspective to be able to accommodate for all the residents' needs, but on a budget they can afford, and for the investor piece, the owner piece, to be able as well to sustain financially a facility like that. So how many residents would that be? And then what kind of amenities would need to be there at least?
Well, I think amenities is going to leave our vocabulary in senior housing. I don't think that anyone's going to care about the media room. And I think the affordable piece is creating an apartment like environment in a home that has the dining room that you would have in a home, a living room you would have, access to going outside. I mean, that is, if you want to talk about amenities, making sure the community has an outside component so that they can get fresh air, they can walk around. You do not need a pool anymore. You do not need a billiard room. You don't need a movie theater room. Because if COVID has taught us anything about housing in general, we won't be having large groups of people together. So if we focus on a home like our homes, how many people hang out in the living room at one time? How many people hang out in the lanai? How many people hang out in the dining room? That is where we are moving, and in more of a shared room, so that seniors get better care by having a companion in the room, so we're alerted if there's a change, because the roommate or the partner or the spouse, whoever it is, will access the caregiver quickly so their quality of life is better. Then that's my opinion.
And about the number per facility, do you have an idea? What would be what would it be for you?
I like 40. I mean, I like 40. I think it fits with, and this is only, I'll just be honest, where we are with COVID. It's a manageable number. It's manageable for care staff. It's manageable for in case there's an outbreak. It's just going to be, I think, a new way instead of 120 people in a building, which is more dangerous. I mean, that I think that's what we're looking at long term. I mean, we have to be honest that COVID is the beginning of being prepared for viruses or diseases that we don't know anything about.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. So thank you very much for being on our podcast today. We absolutely share your point of views, and we haven't talked about that before. So this is amazing to see that visionaries are coming together to talk about what they see the future being. And we all here, I know your commitment to make things happen. You're really dedicated to the cause. So is Pedro and myself as well. So I hope that we will be able to help owners and to help residents move in those kind of affordable and yet really very livable facilities for everyone. Thank you again, Teresa. We love to have you and maybe in the future doing more with you. Pedro, thank you very much. And for all our listeners, if you have any questions, whether you're an investor, whether you're a resident or a family member, you can call us on 407-794-7277. Also by email to contact us on hello@easierlivingforyou.com. And you can have access to all our previous podcasts on www.easierlivingforyou.com. And we will see you next week at 12:45. Bye bye for now.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.